say something, where this black girl has something to say, and it is Vlogmas Day 12. And I wanted to come over to, I was on TikTok Live earlier, or a minute ago before I came over here. And so before anything, before I got home, I was at a Christmas party, like a Christmas mixer for an organization, and they were doing a toy drive. So I donated a toy. You donate a toy, you get a complimentary drink. Really nice place. I've been there before where they were having the event, so that's why I attended. And I just wanted to have a little outing. Um, so every now and then I'll attend something. So that explains, the attire. Earlier today, I did a brand shoot for my business, which went really well because we have our 11-year anniversary coming up. And I needed some fresh content. And so that went really well. So I was excited for that. So it's been much of a draining type of day. I'm trying to see what is it I would like to get into, what is I would like to talk about. I know what I want to talk about. So I saw a video where a young lady said she saw a video and she made a video. So her video pretty much went like this. I saw a video that said, are you healed or are you just isolating yourself from things that trigger you? And it brings me back to the realization that I had when I had uh, two therapists, maybe three therapists ago. I've been in therapy a really long time, and sometimes insurance change, people quit, they leave jobs, whatever, they go off to start their own practices, and it just is the way of the world. So I've had a number of therapists. If I could count, I think I'm still on one hand. My very first therapist, I had those two, and then I had one, two, three, okay, six. A lot of them were short-lived because it would be like, okay, you start sessions with them and maybe 2 sessions in, they probably leave the practice. Or I had one where he wasn't really the greatest therapist, honestly. I felt like he spent a lot more of the time wanting to tell me, like he was spending more of the time acting like he was the client and I was the therapist. So that didn't go over really well. And so he had canceled an appointment on me and I never rescheduled. And then when it's like, typically I'm used to the therapist reaching out and saying, hey, sorry for canceling, I'd like to reschedule. He waited like almost a month, so it just did not work out. But with that being said, she said what she said about, are you healed or are you just isolating yourself from your triggers? And it brought me back to a few therapists ago, because I lost my train of thought. It brought me back to a few therapists ago where she said, you cannot heal your issues with relationships by yourself. You have to interact with the people. You have to interact. You have to meet new people. You have to go to events. You have to do the things that you used to once do to see where you are and how far you've come. So, for example, is not to say interact with people. You don't want to interact with people who you know are not healthy for you. Like, for example, I have a brother that I know for a fact that I cannot interact with him because, one, even though he's my brother, I have to accept who he is as a man, so I cannot change him, right? And so it is triggering for me, and it's a safety concern. So I also don't feel safe around him. Just my own women's intuition, being able to listen to what's on the inside of me. But when we're talking about identifying your triggers, it's like people are not responsible for your triggers, right? But you will feel triggered. If you are a parent, your children will trigger you. If you are meeting new people or, in avenues of attending events or whatever the case may be, you will get triggered. The whole thing is, how do you identify those triggers and how do you heal from that? So you don't want to isolate yourself and say, you know what, I'm never, like for me, I'm like, I'm never getting married again. I'm probably not. Like, the reality of it is, I did that, let it eat up my whole 20s, half of my 30s. I'm good. I'm happy where I'm at right now with me and my children. It is a learning curve, being the primary parent, but being the primary parent allows me a level of consistency, allows me, welcome to the live, allows me a level of opportunity for consistency, growth, and change. And those are the three main things that I've been focusing on over the course of this, time in my life. So when you find yourself to be triggered, it's funny because when she said that, I'll never forget the therapist had said to me, was like, "Are you dating?" I was like, "No, I'm never doing that." And she was like, "Why?" And I was like, "Because I'm in the middle of a divorce." And she was like, "What does that mean?" That just simply means you cannot heal. She said, "You cannot heal your issues with relationships by yourself because it's relationship." Now, it's one thing, she's like, "You've done the work. You're self aware. You are where you need to be within yourself." And the reality is, I never had issues with things like low self esteem and lack of confidence. Those were always things that I was very high in esteem, and I always had a certain level of high confidence. Not for anything, I was also a person like when people be like, "Oh, you too black, you too this, you too that," and I'm like, "I'm of the earth, baby. I'm the darkest, I'm the blackest." I used to be like that. So even now in social settings where I'm leaning on my bookshelf too much, so let me move up. So even now where I'm in social settings and I'm meeting people and it's so easy to talk about myself and what I do and my hopes, dreams, aspirations, my current level of research, my business, who I am as a person altogether. Like those things were never hard for me to do. But when I was in a certain space, in a certain relationship where I found myself having to dim my light and not be excited about my next research and not be excited about my next book and not be excited about the things that I would like to do um, for the future, near and uh, for the near future and the future ahead. um those are things that trigger me. So because those are things that trigger me, I tend to do number one, what you want to do is, if you find that you are in conversation with somebody, and this is over time, right? If it's somebody who you're just meeting, you find that you are triggered by them, like, do you really want to continue that with them and get to a space where you feel comfortable enough to let them know, "Hey, when you did that thing 6 months ago, I was triggered by it"? I mean, that's something you might need to discuss with your therapist on how to cope and get past that. Or do you find yourself managing your triggers, right? Is this a me problem or is this a them problem? Then once you answer that, it's kind of like a flow chart. Once you answer the yes or the no, the yes is going to take you one way, the no is going to take you another way, and then you can kind of work past that and work through it. And I think a lot of it has to do with the level of critical thinking that is required when you are identifying your triggers, when you are getting to a mental space and identifying those. A lot of us, I talked about it a few episodes ago, a few Vlogmas episodes ago, where I was talking about oh, I lost my train of thought. Where I was talking about boundaries. I think that was like 2 episodes ago. I was talking about boundaries. And what happens is you want to be mad at somebody because they crossed your boundary. But did you tell them that was a boundary? Mm, because it's one thing to say, "You know what? I I didn't like when they I don't like when people call me by my middle name." Not personally me, that's not a boundary of mine, but you might say that might be your boundary. And so intrinsically, like within yourself, you're like, "Oh yeah, that's a boundary that I don't like. That's something that I don't like that people do." But if it's somebody who you care about, then you want to kind of express it to them. And it kind of takes me back to, I don't have the book with me right now, but I read the book Boundaries, and one of the things was funny was they started out with like a story time of a lady. It was this lady from her point of view, and she was talking about how her mom would like insert herself into her home, like, expect her to make dinner even after she cooked for her kids and her husband and this and that and the third. And it's like, yeah, quietly you have the boundaries, like, why she always want to come to my house when I get off from work and eat dinner with us? But you never told her that's not something you want to do every day. Or same as like you have a job, and I just was explaining to someone earlier today, if you know that you have a meeting, they put on your calendar a meeting for 15 minutes. Why are you staying for 30 minutes? For me, whenever a meeting was put on my calendar, and of course I've worked full-time for myself since 2017. So when I did work full-time for a company, it wasn't a learning curve. I didn't have an issue with the learning curve, but I was like understanding that, oh, in the workplace, people still don't have boundaries. They still lack boundaries. Even at the last time I worked in the workplace, the people I worked with were at the bachelor's level. Now I'm working with people who's at the doctorate level, and I realized it don't matter what level you at. If they lack boundaries, you're gonna have to teach them. So what would happen is, if you an email help, I sent out an email letting people know that if you schedule a meeting with me that is not on the calendar, like, hey, you pop into my office just to speak with me, I can only allot you 10 minutes. So here's my calendar if you want to schedule something. So people would often, they took it, I'm not gonna say they took it with a grain of salt. They literally took it and ran with it. So if they scheduled on my calendar, they would schedule 15 minutes. They would schedule 30 minutes. But when they scheduled 30 minutes, I would ask them, what is the meeting about? And I will let them know, hey, this meeting is going to be scheduled for 15 minutes. This allows me more time to be proficient in my day. This is when I was a professor, because number one, not only am I having to meet with faculty on different areas of whatever, right? Because you could pop into my office and say hello, but the minute you pop in and you want to sit down, I got to put it on calendar. And that's time that I could be spending with a student. So there's that. Number two is, if you schedule a meeting and it's an hour meeting, it's not gonna go an hour and 5 minutes. It's not gonna even go an hour and a minute, because I gotta go. I got other things to do. So even when I was working with students, it came a point in time, and it's funny how I fell into this job, into that role at the time, because if I had fell into that role when I lacked boundaries, I would have been burnt out and drained down. Because even with students, I had to maintain the boundary to say, hey, as your professor, I am open and willing and available to communicate with you, but it's during this time to this time. And please allow me at least 12 hours. I didn't even say 24. At least allow me 12 hours to respond. The reason being, if you are sending me a text message or calling me and it is 8 o'clock at night, on a day where there was days I had allowed more time in my schedule because I would teach a class that ended at 8:30. So of course, office hours would be from 8:30 to 9:30, because you had to have office hours an hour before class and an hour after class. So if you reach out to me at 9:30 because you forgot something after class, you can't anticipate that I'm gonna get back to you. If you give me 12 hours, I'll get back to you at 12 in the at 9 in the morning the next day. I think that was reasonable. So, identifying what those boundaries are. I know everybody's not fortunate enough to be in a workplace where they can create a boundary and maintain it. And we're not in a current social economic climate where you could say, forget this job, they're crossing my boundaries, right? So that's why, I'm always like, again, somebody asked me a few episodes ago, like, how do you find a job to pay your bills? To be quite honest with you, I acquired bills a very long time ago, and then I found a way to work, and through my education, to not live above my means. So just because I made more money didn't mean I went and bought another house. Just because I made more money didn't mean I'm gonna get multiple cars. From 2020 to 2023, I drove a 2004 car. So when I did get myself a new car for 2023, that was my prize. I deserved that. I have been saving up for it. So, you know. But when we're talking about your triggers, you got to identify them. And if you are easily triggered, like as a parent, it is so much work, right? And if you don't do the work, I go back to another video that I saw on TikTok where the lady said, when y'all adolescents come to therapy, they're telling us all what's going on in the home. And some of it is the way that you're parenting. And I'll never forget when I felt like I was like this, like at a riff with the kids. And my therapist, a couple therapists ago, she said, what is your parenting style like? And she pulled out this chart and she identified the way that I'm parenting. And the reason that I was frustrated was because I was trying to parent them the same. They're different children, right? And I think also too, we get stagnant in our parenting style. And what happens is we get frustrated when that is no longer working. The whole time, all we need to do is change. Because guess what? They're changing, they're ebbing, they're flowing, they're growing, their hormones, they're this, they're that. And such as your parenting style needs to be on this same ebb and flow with them. What's going to work at 10 is not going to work at 11, and what's going to work for The boy that's 10 is not going to work for the girl that's 10, and what works for the girl that's 14 is not going to work for the boy that's 14. It is very different. So identify your parenting style. And a lot of this stuff is not anything that I've come to learn on my own. It was through me actively, proactively doing the work. Even I said before, I'm even learning astrology so that I could be on top of whatever is going on. So I think I want to stop here because we're at 15 minutes. I didn't know I was going to get over here and be rambling. I just wanted to come on for like a good hot 10 minutes. But you know what you can do. You want to like, share, subscribe to this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel, Black Girl Say Something, and there'll be some links in the description of this episode. Interact with them. We post a podcast episode every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as we do offer some subscriber only content where if you tune in, this Black girl has even more to say. Be sure to follow us on TikTok, and you can also like us on Facebook. Thank you for tuning in. Catch us tomorrow on live over here on YouTube at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.